My best friend, since age 7, mixed our blood together and declared we'd be best friends forever, then spent years trying to give me her eczema by contaminating my lotions with her skin cells. When that didn't work, she started breaking into my apartment while I slept to apply her prescription creams on me, until the night she ambushed me in a parking garage with industrial allergens and a potato peeler for an emergency skin transplant. Now she's legally banned from coming within 500 feet of me. My best friend since childhood is legally banned from coming within 500 feet of me because she tried to give me her eczema by contaminating everything I owned with her skin cells. And when that didn't work, she attempted to perform a skin transplant with a potato peeler. Dia and I had been inseparable since we were 7, when she moved next door covered in eczema patches and declared we'd be best friends forever. She then proceeded to scratch her arm until it bled and pressed it against mine until our blood mixed. You see, she came from one of those freakishly traditional families where skin conditions were treated like sacred bonds. Her mother and aunts all had various autoimmune disorders and would gather monthly to apply their homemade treatments together, sharing their prescription creams like communion wine. Her grandmother kept jars of their collective shed skin, claiming it had healing properties when mixed into lotions. Growing up, Dia practiced skincare rituals on me constantly, making me sit through hours of her applying creams and documenting every mark on my body. If I refused, she'd cry that I was rejecting our dermal destiny. She kept photo albums of our skin, comparing moles and marks, and made me sign contracts in glitter pen promising we'd transform together when the time came. When Dia's eczema worsened at 22, she cornered me in her apartment and handed me a jar of yellowish cream. She said she'd been mixing her prescription steroids with her own skin cells for months, creating a synchronization salve. She insisted I needed to apply it daily so my skin could learn her condition, because true friends share everything, especially suffering. I refused, and she broke down sobbing, saying our souls couldn't truly connect unless our skin matched. The next week, she revealed the spare room she'd converted into a treatment chamber, 2 medical chairs, UV lamps, humidifiers, and a refrigerator full of labeled jars containing her various skin samples dating back years. I tried to avoid her during flare-ups, but Dia was relentless. She switched my body wash with her medicated ones, hid allergen patches in my car, and demanded I use her prescription creams preventatively. She downloaded apps to track my skin's moisture levels and would show up with testing strips, insisting on checking my pH balance. She started stealing my pillowcases to check for skin cells and broke into my bathroom to replace all my products with her prescribed treatments. My boyfriend found her in our bedroom, photographing my back to document my progression. When he tried to kick her out, she screamed that he was preventing my metamorphosis by keeping me away from her treatments. She'd filled my closet with medical gowns labeled "For When We Heal Together." I still thought she'd eventually stop, until she showed up at my birthday dinner glowing. I complimented her clear skin, but she laughed and said, "This isn't just my victory, it's ours." Then she revealed what she'd been doing for the past 6 months. "I've been adding my skin cells to everything you touch," she said. "Your lotions, your makeup, even your laundry detergent. Soon your immune system will recognize my condition as its own." She pulled out a folder documenting everything, photos of her breaking into my apartment, receipts for the duplicate keys she'd made, logs of every contamination. I ran to my car while she chased me, screaming, "You can't run from your true skin. It's already changing." I got tested immediately and discovered I'd developed minor allergic reactions from constant exposure to her medications and skin cells. But when I didn't develop eczema, Dia lost her mind completely. She started showing up at my work, scratching herself until she bled, telling customers I had the same condition, but was hiding it with expensive treatments. She created fake medical records showing I had severe eczema and sent them to my insurance, trying to get me approved for disability benefits. She called my employer claiming I was contagious and shouldn't be allowed to work with others. She posted photos of me online, circling normal skin variations and asking support groups to diagnose what I'm concealing. Then she started getting desperate. She befriended a dermatology nurse and stole prescription pads, trying to fill medications in my name. She mailed my parents pamphlets about supporting children with chronic skin conditions. She even contacted my ex-boyfriends, asking if they'd noticed any skin abnormalities during our relationships. Everything came crashing down when she ambushed me in a parking garage with what she called her emergency transformation kit. She had medical tools, jars of her skin samples, prescription creams, and industrial-strength allergens. She managed to smear some compound on my arm before I could react, screaming, "If you won't transform naturally, I'll help you." During the trial, police found her freezer contained years of dated skin samples and blood vials. She had journals detailing her contamination schedule and files of forged medical documents. The security footage showed everything, but somehow that made it worse. The parking garage cameras captured what looked like 2 friends having an animated conversation, not an assault with industrial allergens. When I tried to run, Dia grabbed my arm with both hands, her fingers digging in as she whispered those words that still echo in my nightmares. "Our skin is already singing together," she breathed against my ear, her grip tightening as the burning started. The industrial strength compound she'd smeared on her palms before approaching me was already working, creating angry red welts that spread up my forearm like wildfire. I screamed and tried to pull away, but she held on, scratching the same repetitive pattern into my skin that I'd watched her trace on her own arms since we were children. 3 circles, then a line, then 3 more circles, her ritual mark. Mall security arrived within minutes, drawn by my screaming, but Dia transformed instantly, hiding the contamination kit behind her back while tears streamed down her face. She became the concerned friend, the worried companion trying to help someone having a breakdown. "She's having another episode," Dia told the security guard, her voice trembling with perfectly manufactured concern. "I've been trying to get her to take her medication, but she keeps saying saying these terrible things about me. I tried to explain, pointing at my burning arm. She's trying to give me her skin disease. Look what she did. But even to my own ears, the words sounded insane. Who tries to give someone eczema? Who believes skin conditions can be transferred through contamination? The security guard, a middle-aged man with visible psoriasis patches on his neck, looked between us with growing sympathy for Dia. She'd chosen her victim well, approaching someone who would understand the pain of skin conditions, who would see her as the victim rather than the perpetrator. "Ma'am, would you like me to call medical help?" he asked me gently, the same tone people use with confused elderly relatives. Sometimes stress can make us say things we don't mean. Dia nodded eagerly, still hiding the kit. "That would be wonderful. She's been struggling with delusions about my medical condition. She thinks it's contagious, which is so hurtful when you actually live with eczema." I had seconds to decide, accept the help that would put me directly under Dia's control in a medical setting, or run and look guilty of something I couldn't even properly explain. As I hesitated, I noticed Dia unconsciously scratching her arm in that same pattern. 3 circles, a line, 3 circles. The movement was so ingrained she didn't even realize she was doing it. I chose to run. Yanking my arm free, I sprinted toward my car. My purse fell in the struggle as Dia grabbed for me again, spilling its contents across the concrete. She let it fall, more interested in maintaining her performance for security. "Please don't let her drive in this state," Dia called after the guard. "I'm so worried about her mental health. She's been getting worse for months." I made it to my car and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see Dia talking animatedly with security, gesturing toward my car with concern while cradling my abandoned purse like a worried friend would. It wasn't until I was 3 blocks away that I felt the weight in my jacket pocket. My fingers found smooth metal and plastic. A medical alert bracelet I'd never seen before, engraved with my name and a list of conditions. Severe eczema, prone to delusions during flare-ups. Emergency contact, Dia Patel. The welts on my arm were spreading, the burning sensation intensifying with each passing minute. I needed medical attention, but going to the hospital meant risking another encounter with Dia's carefully laid groundwork. Still, I had no choice. The reaction was getting worse. I drove to the nearest urgent care, trying to ignore how my skin felt like it was crawling with invisible insects. The waiting room was nearly empty, just an elderly couple and a mother with a coughing child. I approached the reception desk, cradling my inflamed arm. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile that faltered when she saw my arm. "Oh my, let me get you checked in quickly. Name?" I gave my information, watching her type. Her expression shifted to recognition, and my stomach dropped. "I see you're already in our system," she said, scrolling through her screen. "Dr. Chen's patient, right? He's mentioned your case. Severe eczema with psychological components?" Dr. Chen, Dia's dermatologist, the one she'd been seeing for years, who she talked about like he was a miracle worker. Somehow, I was already listed as his patient. "There must be a mistake," I started, but she was already printing forms. "No mistake. You've been in our system for months. I see here you've had prescriptions filled at 3 different pharmacies. Your insurance has been covering the treatments." She handed me a clipboard. "Just update any information that's changed." The intake form showed a complete medical history I'd never provided. Chronic eczema since childhood, multiple failed treatments, tendency toward medical delusion during flare-ups, emergency contact, Dia Patel, secondary contact, Marcus Chen, my boyfriend, but with Dia's last name attached. 40 minutes later, I was finally in an examination room. The actual doctor, not Dr. Chen, thankfully, was concerned about the welts and the obvious allergic reaction. She was asking about possible exposure to industrial chemicals when the door opened. "I'm sorry, I know you said no visitors, but this is her emergency contact," the nurse explained, ushering Dia in. She was carrying my purse, her face a mask of concern. "She's been so worried." "Thank God you're getting help," Dia said, setting my purse on the chair. "I brought your things. I know how you get during episodes. Remember, I'm here to support you through this." The doctor looked between us, clearly trying to assess the situation. I could see her noting Dia's calm demeanor versus my agitated state, the way Dia positioned herself as the caring friend while I looked paranoid and unstable. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Why is Dia calling me crying? She says you're having a breakdown and attacked her in the parking garage. What's going on? I'm coming to get you." More texts flooded in. My mother, my father, my boss, all getting calls or messages from Dia about my deteriorating mental health and her deep concern for my well-being. "I need to go," I said, standing up despite the doctor's protests. The detail about the security guard having psoriasis patches shows how Dia picked her audience perfectly, someone who would naturally side with her about skin conditions. The welts were spreading up to my shoulder now, but staying meant letting Dia control the narrative even more. "You can't leave without treatment," the doctor insisted. "These welts need attention." "She does this," Dia said softly, her voice full of practiced sorrow. "Refuses treatment, won't take her medications. I've been trying to help her for months, but she's convinced I'm trying to hurt her. It's heartbreaking to watch your best friend struggle like this." I grabbed my purse and pushed past them both, Dia's performance continuing behind me as I fled. In the parking lot, I sat in my car checking my phone. The damage was spreading as fast as the welts on my arm. My Instagram had been flooded with targeted ads for eczema treatments, skincare routines, and support groups for chronic skin conditions. Groups I'd never joined showed me as a member for months. Posts I'd never made documented a journey with eczema I'd never experienced. An email from my boss asked about the accommodation requests that had been submitted on my behalf. Light sensitivity from my skin condition, need for frequent breaks to apply medications, flexible scheduling for flare-ups, all signed with digital signatures that looked close enough to mine to pass casual inspection. I drove home in a daze, the welts finally starting to respond to the antihistamine I'd found in my purse. My apartment building came into view, and I saw my elderly neighbor watering the plants outside. She waved when she saw me, her face brightening. "Feeling better water, dear?" she called out. "That sweet friend of yours has been so helpful, watering your plants while you've been sick. Such a devoted girl, coming by every week even when you weren't home." Plants. I didn't have any plants, but looking up at my balcony, I could see them now. A row of potted flowers and herbs I'd never purchased, never watered, never wanted. Dia had been in my apartment weekly, had convinced my neighbor I'd been sick, had created a whole narrative I knew nothing about. My hands shook as I changed the locks that evening. It was the third time in 6 months, but now I understood why the previous changes hadn't worked. As I removed the old lock, I checked every possible hiding spot: behind the electrical meter, under the doormat, inside the light fixture. I found the spare key taped inside the meter box, wrapped in plastic with a note in Dia's handwriting. "For emergencies, D." How many copies had she made? How many times had she been inside while I slept? My parents called while I was installing the new deadbolt. I could hear the worry in my mother's voice before she even spoke. "Sweetheart, Dia sent us some articles about supporting adult children with delusional parasitosis. She's very concerned about you. She says you think your skin is contaminated." I tried to explain, but how could I? Every word made me sound more unstable. My best friend was systematically infiltrating my life, but describing it out loud sounded like paranoid delusion. The welts on my arm had faded to pink marks that could have been anything. Without proof, I was just a woman afraid of her childhood friend. That night, I sat on my couch with my laptop, trying to document everything. But as I scrolled through my social media, I realized the depth of Dia's campaign. Tagged photos at doctors' offices I'd never visited, check-ins at pharmacies where I'd supposedly filled prescriptions, a whole digital footprint of an illness I didn't have. My phone rang. "Marcus, I'm at your door," he said. "We need to talk about what happened today. Dia's really worried about you, and honestly, so am I." I let him in, watching his face as he took in the new locks, the way I'd moved furniture to block potential entry points, the notebook where I'd been documenting Dia's actions. His expression grew more concerned with each detail. "She called me crying for an hour," he said, sitting carefully on the couch like I might spook. "She says you attacked her in the parking garage, that you've been getting worse for months but refuse to admit you need help." I showed him my arm, the fading welts still visible. "She did this with some kind of industrial allergen. She's been contaminating my things, trying to give me eczema." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then gently, "Why would she do that? What would she gain from giving you a skin condition?" How could I explain Dia's family, the ritual of shared suffering, the belief that matching skin conditions created spiritual bonds? It sounded insane even to me, and I'd witnessed it firsthand for years. "She's been planning this for months," I said instead, showing him the medical records on my phone. "Look, prescriptions in my name I never filled, insurance claims for treatments I never received." Marcus studied the screen, his frown deepening. "How did you get into her medical portal to find these?" My stomach dropped. In trying to prove Dia's crimes, I'd revealed that I knew her passwords, that I'd accessed her accounts. Instead of looking like a victim, I looked like the stalker. "She used to make me memorize them," I said weakly, "in case of emergencies." But Marcus was already pulling back, the doubt clear in his eyes. "Maybe you should talk to someone, a professional. This whole thing with Dia, it seems like it's consuming you." After he left, I sat in my locked apartment and finally understood the brilliance of Dia's plan. Every piece of evidence I could provide made me look worse. Every attempt to prove her contamination made me seem more paranoid. She'd created a perfect trap where defending myself only tightened the noose. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of me sleeping, taken from inside my bedroom. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago, after I'd changed the locks the second time. The message below was in Dia's distinctive style. "You look so peaceful when you accept treatment. Stop fighting your true skin." I went to my bedroom and found it immediately. The prescription cream on my nightstand I'd never purchased, the cap slightly loose. The pillow smelled wrong, like the cologne I'd noticed before but couldn't place. Men's cologne, the kind Dia had started wearing months ago because it helped with her anxiety. She'd been here, in my bed, applying her treatments while I slept. I called the police, but what could I report? That my best friend was trying to give me eczema? That she'd been in my apartment applying prescription creams? Without proof of breaking and entering, without evidence of actual harm, I sounded delusional. The officer who took my report did so with the same gentle condescension I'd seen all day. "We'll look into it," he promised, but I could see in his eyes that the report would be filed under mental health concerns, not criminal activity. That's when I realized the true horror of my situation. Dia had been playing a long game I hadn't even known we were playing. Every action she'd taken had 2 interpretations, the truth and the story she was selling, and her story was winning. The welts on my arm had faded completely by morning, leaving no evidence of the assault, but the digital footprint she'd created would last forever. Medical records showing years of treatment for a condition I didn't have. Insurance claims that made me look like a fraud if I denied being sick. Social media documentation of a mental health crisis that existed only in her carefully crafted narrative. I was trapped between 2 impossible choices: accept her contamination and let her give me the skin condition she believed would bond us forever, or fight back and watch as every piece of evidence made me look more unstable. As I sat in my locked apartment, checking every lotion and cream for signs of tampering, I finally understood why Dia had chosen this method. She didn't need to break down my door or physically force me to transform. She just needed to make my reality so unbearable that accepting her version would seem like the only sane choice. The war for my skin had begun, and I was already losing. The next morning brought a new horror. Dia had started live streaming on social media, sitting in what looked like a therapist's office with tissues in her lap. Her eyes were red-rimmed as she spoke to the camera about supporting friends through invisible illness denial. The comments poured in, praising her patience and dedication. I watched helplessly as strangers validated her narrative, offering advice on how to help someone who refused to acknowledge their condition. My phone rang constantly. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives all reaching out after seeing Dia's posts. Each conversation followed the same pattern: concern for my well-being, gentle suggestions about seeking help, and uncomfortable silences when I tried to explain the truth. The more I protested, the more delusional I sounded. I decided to document everything systematically. Armed with my laptop and the determination to prove my sanity, I began compiling evidence: screenshots of fake medical records, timestamps of unauthorized apartment entries, photos of contaminated products. But as I worked, I noticed something disturbing in my browser history: searches for eczema treatments I hadn't made, forum posts asking for advice about skin conditions posted from my accounts, an entire digital trail suggesting I'd been researching my condition for months. The doorbell rang, interrupting my work. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing outside. My heart sank as I opened the door. They explained that both Dia and I had filed reports against each other. They needed to take statements from both parties. As I recounted the contamination attempts, I watched their expressions shift from professional interest to barely concealed skepticism. One officer kept glancing at his partner when I mentioned the skin cell contamination. After they left, I checked my doorbell camera footage, hoping to find evidence of Dia's break-ins. What I found made my blood run cold. The footage from the past week showed me entering my apartment multiple times in the middle of the night, but I had no memory of leaving my bed. In one clip, I appeared to be sleepwalking, fumbling with keys while wearing pajamas. But the way I moved, the angle of my shoulders, it wasn't quite right. I zoomed in on one frame and saw it. The person wearing my pajamas had a small tattoo on their wrist. A tattoo I didn't have. A tattoo that matched the one Dia had gotten last year. 3 circles, a line, 3 circles. Her ritual mark permanently etched into her skin. She'd been wearing my clothes, copying my walk, creating footage that would make any real evidence I had seem questionable. If I claimed someone broke in, she had video proof that I was the one coming and going at odd hours. My 7-year-old niece called me that afternoon, her voice small and confused. She asked why Aunt Dia said I was sick but wouldn't take my medicine. Then she added something that made my skin crawl. Dia had shown her pictures of my arms from when I was sleeping, pointing out marks and blemishes that proved I was hiding my condition. I drove to my sister's house immediately, but the damage was done. My sister met me at the door with a mixture of concern and wariness. She'd seen the photos too. Dia had been visiting during playdates, bringing gifts for the children while expressing worry about my deteriorating condition. She'd even offered to teach my sister how to identify the early signs of skin disorders in case they were hereditary. Back home, I discovered something even more disturbing. Hidden in my closet was a collection of medical supplies I'd never purchased: prescription creams, sterile gauze, medication bottles with my name on them. The detail about the tattoo, 3 circles, a line, 3 circles, is a clever way to reveal the deception while also hinting at some deeper meaning to Dia's obsession. The prescriptions were real, filled at pharmacies across town over the past months. Security footage would show someone who looked like me picking them up. I spent hours going through my apartment with a blacklight, revealing the true extent of Dia's contamination campaign. Traces of medicated cream on doorknobs, light switches, even my toothbrush. She'd been methodical, ensuring I'd have constant low-level exposure to her treatments. My best friend Keisha finally agreed to meet me for coffee. She listened to my story with growing alarm, but then dropped her own bombshell. Dia had been dating her brother for the past 3 months. She'd integrated herself so naturally into their family gatherings that no one questioned her presence. She'd made it seem like such a natural connection, bonding over their shared concern for me. The revelation that Dia had strategically positioned herself within my inner circle through romantic relationships made me realize how deeply she'd planned this. Every move had been calculated to ensure she had access and credibility. I started investigating Dia's past, hoping to find others who might have experienced similar treatment. What I found in old college forums made my stomach turn. Whispered stories about her freshman roommate who'd developed mysterious rashes and transferred schools, a lab partner who'd complained about contaminated equipment before dropping the class. Always subtle, always deniable, but a pattern was emerging. My investigation led me to discover the truth about Dia's contamination methods. She wasn't mixing substances. She was using medical-grade microneedles to inject her medications into sealed containers. The tiny puncture marks were virtually invisible, but they allowed her to contaminate products without breaking seals or leaving obvious evidence. One evening, I found a USB drive taped under my bathroom sink. It contained hundreds of photos: me sleeping, showering, getting dressed, all taken from inside my apartment over months. But worse were the videos of Dia lying in my bed, wearing my clothes, applying creams to her skin while whispering about our transformation journey. I tried to use this evidence, but Dia was prepared. She'd already told people I'd been hacking into her accounts, stealing her personal photos and videos. When I tried to show the USB drive to Marcus, he asked how I could prove I hadn't planted it myself. The timestamps showed dates when Dia had alibis, family dinners, work events, times when multiple people could verify her location. My parents called with increasing frequency, their worry palpable. Dia had been sending them articles about adult children with delusional parasitosis, the false belief that one's skin is contaminated. She'd positioned herself as the concerned friend trying to help while I spiraled into paranoia. When I tried to explain the truth, my mother's voice broke as she asked if I'd consider seeing someone, just to talk through what I was experiencing. The isolation was suffocating. Every attempt to defend myself deepened the narrative of my instability. Dia had created a perfect storm where the truth sounded like delusion and evidence looked like obsession. Then I found her grandmother's journals. Hidden in a storage unit Dia had rented in my name, I discovered boxes of documentation dating back decades. The journals detailed something called the synthesis, a family tradition where skin conditions were seen as spiritual gifts to be shared. Generation after generation of women in Dia's family had practiced these contamination rituals, believing that matching skin conditions created unbreakable irrevocable bonds. The journals revealed that Dia genuinely believed she was completing a sacred tradition. In her mind, she wasn't assaulting me. She was offering me the greatest gift her family could bestow. The delusion ran so deep that she truly thought my resistance was a test of her dedication. But knowledge of her motivations didn't make her less dangerous. If anything, it made her more so. She wasn't acting out of malice, but out of a twisted love that demanded I share her suffering. I made a crucial mistake when I confronted her with what I'd found. Meeting her in a public park, I thought witnesses would keep me safe, but Dia had anticipated this. She'd invited my mother to the same park, timing it so she'd arrive just as I was waving the journals at Dia, looking unhinged and aggressive. My mother saw me shouting at a crying Dia, holding what looked like stolen property, accusing her of generational conspiracies. The optics were devastating. Dia collapsed into my mother's arms, sobbing about how hard it was to watch me deteriorate, how she just wanted her best friend back. That night, I discovered Dia had been sleeping in my apartment during her caretaking visits. The cologne I'd smelled wasn't just transferred from her clothes. She'd been lying in my bed for hours, wearing my pajamas, living out fantasies of our shared life. She'd even been using my shower, my towels, my toothbrush, trying to merge our daily routines until we became indistinguishable. The psychological warfare escalated when Dia made me an offer. She would stop everything: the contamination, the social media campaign, the family manipulation, if I would just try her prescription cream once, just once, to understand what she lived with every day. It seemed like such a small request compared to the hell she'd created, and for a moment I actually considered it. But I knew that one application would become proof that I'd been using the treatments all along. One use would validate every prescription filled in my name, every medical record she'd forged. It would be the first step in accepting her reality. My refusal triggered a new wave of attacks. Dia framed it on social media as an ableist rejection of her reality, claiming I thought her skin condition made her dirty or contagious. Disability advocates who didn't know the full story rallied to her defense. I became the face of discrimination against people with chronic skin conditions. The financial toll mounted as I hired a lawyer to pursue a restraining order. But Dia had anticipated this too. She'd been building a case that I was the one stalking her. The access to medical accounts, the knowledge of her passwords, the storage unit in my name containing her family's belongings. Every defensive action I'd taken could be reframed as offensive. My world shrank as friends chose sides or, more often, chose neutrality. My coworker Jamal admitted he believed me but couldn't risk his promotion by getting involved. Dia's brother worked at a major client company. These strategic connections she'd built created a web of pressure points throughout my life. I discovered the true extent of her planning when I found cloud storage accounts in my name, containing thousands of photos documenting my supposed treatment journey. The images had been edited with timestamps showing gradual skin changes over months, creating a visual narrative of an illness I didn't have. She'd even included before photos from our childhood, marking normal skin variations as early symptoms. The breaking point came when I realized I'd started unconsciously checking my skin constantly, examining every mark and blemish. Dia's campaign had made me hyper-aware of my body in a way that looked, to outside observers, exactly like the obsessive behavior she'd described. I was becoming the person she'd painted me as, not through contamination, but through psychological torture. My therapist, who I'd started seeing to document my mental stability, was required to report when I described the contamination. My accusations of systematic poisoning triggered mandatory reporting for delusions of persecution. The system designed to protect me became another tool in Dia's arsenal. I tried recording our interactions, but Dia had an uncanny ability to spot surveillance. She'd pivot instantly from aggressor to victim, crying about how I was documenting her medical struggles, turning my evidence gathering into further proof of my obsession with her condition. Family events became battlegrounds. I missed my nephew's church pageant because I'd spent hours washing potential contamination off my hands, scrubbing until they were raw. My absence was noted, my priorities questioned. Meanwhile, Dia attended with my sister's family, the devoted friend holding my place until I was ready to rejoin the family. The community divided as the story spread. Local shop owners who'd known us since childhood didn't know who to believe. The farmer's market vendor who'd watched us grow up was traumatized when we had a confrontation near her stall. Two girls she'd considered daughters now at war over something she couldn't understand. I lost freelance clients as my erratic behavior and reliability issues became known. Deadlines missed while dealing with contamination. Meetings rescheduled due to legal appointments. The general exhaustion of fighting a war on multiple fronts. It all contributed to a professional reputation in tatters. It didn't help that Dia's brother worked at one of my major clients, feeding concerns about my stability. Eventually, I couldn't stay in my apartment. The contamination was too extensive, the memories too painful. I moved in with Keisha temporarily, but even there, Dia's reach extended. She posted about helping pack my things for a mental health facility, complete with photos of my belongings boxed up with care. The implication was clear. I was being institutionalized. My father's phone call was the hardest to bear. His voice heavy with fear, he begged me to get help and stop this vendetta against Dia. She'd shown them medical records, prescription histories, documentation that painted a picture of a daughter in crisis. How could he not believe the evidence before his eyes? The investigation I'd started had unintended consequences. A young pharmacy technician who'd helped me trace the fraudulent prescriptions was fired for HIPAA violations. She was a single mother who lost her health insurance along with her job. Her husband blamed me for their family's financial crisis and joined Dia's online support group, adding his voice to those calling me dangerous. I faced a moral crisis. My pursuit of justice was hurting innocent people, but stopping meant letting Dia win, accepting the false narrative she'd created. I continued gathering evidence despite the collateral damage, a choice that haunted me but felt necessary. Marcus asked me a question question that shook my certainty. During a moment of exhaustion, he wondered aloud if Dia really thought she was helping. What if, in her mind, she was trying to save me? The question burrowed into my thoughts because I couldn't immediately refute it with certainty. Her delusion was so complete, her belief so absolute, that she might genuinely see herself as a hero in this story. In a desperate attempt to establish credibility, I publicly admitted to past struggles with skin picking and anxiety. I hoped transparency about my real mental health challenges would make my current claims more believable. Instead, it provided Dia with ammunition, proof that I had a history of skin-focused psychological issues. Looking through old social media, I found posts from Dia I'd missed months ago, cryptic messages about fusion dreams and dermal destiny that I'd scrolled past, thinking they were just her usual eccentricity. The warning signs had been there, but I'd been too comfortable in our friendship to see them as threats. Dia's lawyer filed an emergency protective order against me, citing my stalking behavior and obsessive documentation of her medical condition. The court date was set for 72 hours later. I had 3 days to prove my sanity in a legal system already primed to see me as unstable. Marcus asking if Dia thinks she's helping is such a good moment. It makes us wonder about Dia's mind without making her less scary. The 3-day deadline at the end creates pressure that feels real and immediate. I dove deeper into Dia's family history, trying to understand the roots of her delusion. What I found was heartbreaking. Dia genuinely believed our souls had bonded through that blood-mixing ritual when we were 7. In her family's tradition, skin fusion would complete the spiritual connection. She'd been raised to believe that love meant sharing suffering, that true bonds required matching scars. This understanding forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. To prove assault, I'd have to use Dia's mental illness against her. I'd have to betray the childhood promise we'd made to never call each other crazy, to always validate each other's experiences. The girl who'd held me through my parents' divorce, who'd been my anchor through every teenage crisis, was now my adversary in a legal battle that would destroy one of us. The transformation from empathetic friend to strategic legal opponent was brutal, but necessary. I convinced Dia's young cousin to steal her grandmother's journals during a family dinner, promising to return them after making copies. The betrayal of using a child in our war made me sick, but I needed the evidence. Small victories felt hollow. When I finally proved the contamination through chemical analysis, the triumph was overshadowed by Dia's genuine heartbreak in court. We both cried as our friendship died in a sterile legal setting. Two women who'd once shared everything now separated by restraining orders and legal documents. Dia's counterclaim of defamation gained credibility when some of my supporters began harassing her online. I couldn't control everyone who believed my story, but their aggressive tactics made me look like the orchestrator of a harassment campaign. The narrative shifted again. Was I the victim or the perpetrator? Everything hinged on the testimony of the dermatology nurse who'd sold Dia the supplies. She'd been granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation, but her testimony would reveal the extent of the medical fraud. As the court date approached, I prepared for the final battle in a war I'd never wanted to fight. The truth was messier than anyone wanted to admit. Dia was both perpetrator and victim, indoctrinated from childhood into believing that love required shared suffering. I was both victim and aggressor, driven to increasingly desperate measures to prove my sanity. We were two women destroyed by a twisted interpretation of friendship, and only the legal system could untangle the mess we'd made. As I sat in Keisha's guest room the night before court, surrounded by evidence boxes and legal documents, I realized that regardless of the outcome, neither of us would emerge unscathed. The war for my skin had evolved into something larger, a battle for truth in a world where perception had become reality. But I was ready to fight, because underneath the exhaustion and trauma, a core truth remained. My skin was my own, my body was my own, and no amount of contamination, manipulation, or twisted love could change that fundamental fact. The final phase was about to begin. The footage from the documentary filmmaker arrived by courier the morning of the court hearing. I watched it alone in Keisha's kitchen, my hands trembling as decades-old rituals played out on screen. 4-year-old Dia stood in a circle of women, her tiny arms covered in rashes while her grandmother pressed herbs into the inflamed skin. The other children in the footage looked terrified, but Dia's face showed only determination, already learning that love meant enduring pain together. The filmmaker had included a note explaining why she couldn't testify. Her own family belonged to the same church community, and speaking out would mean losing her parents, her siblings, her entire support network. She'd already risked everything by sending the footage. I understood. The choice between truth and family wasn't one anyone should have to make. At the courthouse, I arrived to find the parking lot divided like a wedding. Dia's supporters on one side, mine on the other. The book club women wore matching scarves in solidarity. My mother stood with my father near the entrance, their faces etched with confusion and grief. They'd chosen neutrality, which meant standing literally between the two groups, belonging to neither. Inside the courtroom, Dia had arranged childhood photos across her defense table. Pictures of us at 7, 8, 9, always touching, always together. Her lawyer had blown up the photo from my 8th birthday where Dia and I had matching temporary tattoos. Even then, she'd insisted we mark our skin the same way. The chemical analysis results were presented first. The lab technician explained in clinical terms how prescription corticosteroids had been detected in my lotions, shampoo, and laundry detergent at concentrations high enough to cause the welts, but low enough to avoid serious harm. Dia watched the testimony while unconsciously scratching her arm in that familiar pattern. 3 circles, a line, 3 circles. When the dermatology nurse took the stand, her hands shook as she described selling Dia medical supplies under the table. She'd thought they were for Dia's own use until she saw the quantity. Enough needles and syringes to contaminate hundreds of products. The nurse's voice broke when she admitted she'd needed the money for her daughter's asthma medication. The judge ordered a recess after the nurse's testimony. In the hallway, I passed Dia's mother, who grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Her eyes were wild as she whispered about the family curse, how each generation had to pass it on or face spiritual death. Security separated us, but not before I saw the same desperate belief in her eyes that I'd seen in Dia's. Back in session, Dia's psychological evaluation was presented. The court-appointed psychiatrist testified that Dia showed signs of induced delusional disorder, learned from childhood within a closed community that reinforced the beliefs. She genuinely believed contaminating me was an act of love, that my resistance was a test of her dedication, that success would create an unbreakable spiritual bond. The revelation that made the courtroom gasp came from Dia's grandmother's journals. The practice went back 6 generations, each mother teaching her daughter that skin conditions were gifts to be shared. But the most disturbing entry was recent. Dia's grandmother had identified me as Dia's skin sister when we were 7, the day our blood mixed. Everything since then had been preparation for this moment. Dia took the stand against her lawyer's advice. She didn't deny anything. Instead, she explained with heartbreaking sincerity how she'd spent months preparing my transformation, how each contamination was carefully measured to avoid real harm while encouraging my skin to wake up. She pulled out a calendar showing the schedule: Mondays for lotions, Wednesdays for laundry, Fridays for what she called direct application, while I slept. The security footage from my apartment was played. The courtroom watched in silence as Dia entered with her copied key, wearing my pajamas, lying in my bed, and applying creams to her own skin while whispering prayers for our union. In one video, she held my hand while I slept, tracing that pattern onto my palm over and over. My testimony came last. I focused on facts, not emotions. The dates I'd discovered contamination, the medical fraud, the systematic campaign to make me appear mentally ill. I showed the fake medical records, the forged prescriptions, the social media posts that had destroyed my reputation. I kept my voice steady even when describing waking up to find her in my bed. The judge asked if I wanted to press for maximum charges. Assault with a chemical agent could mean serious prison time. I looked at Dia, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was 23 years old, raised in a cult that taught her love meant shared suffering, genuinely believing she was saving my soul by marking my skin. I requested treatment instead of prison, intensive psychiatric care at a facility specializing in cult deprogramming. The judge agreed, adding mandatory distance requirements and monitoring. Dia would get help, but she would also face consequences. The restraining order was comprehensive: 500 feet minimum distance, no contact through third parties, no social media interaction, monitoring of her treatment compliance. Violation would mean immediate imprisonment. The order would last 5 years, renewable if necessary. As the judge read the verdict, Dia's family began praying in unison, their voices rising in an old dialect I didn't recognize. They were escorted out, but not before Dia's grandmother pointed at me and made a marking gesture in the air. 3 circles, a line, 3 circles. A curse or a blessing, I'd never know. Outside the courthouse, the community split like a wound. The book club women helped Dia to a van that would take her to the treatment facility. My supporters celebrated quietly, understanding this victory came with losses. The farmer's market vendor hugged me while crying, mourning the little girls we'd been. My parents approached hesitantly. My mother touched my face, checking my skin like she had when I was young. She didn't apologize for doubting me, but her eyes said everything. My father simply nodded. The engineer in him finally understanding the evidence had been real all along. Marcus waited by his car. We'd broken up during the trial preparation, the stress too much for a relationship already strained by doubt. He offered a small smile and a wave before driving away. Another casualty of Dia's war. The pharmacy technician who'd lost her job was there too. I'd started a fund to help her family, and several of my supporters had contributed. It wouldn't replace her career, but it would keep her family afloat while she found new work. She didn't blame me anymore, understanding we'd both been caught in Dia's delusion. Keisha drove me back to her house in silence. The legal victory felt hollow. I'd won the right to live without contamination, but the cost was a friendship that had defined half my life. The girl who'd held my hand through every childhood fear was gone, replaced by someone I had to protect myself from. That night, I found one last contamination Dia had left. Inside my jewelry box was a locket I'd never seen before. Inside were 2 photos, one of her skin during a flare-up, one of mine from when she'd photographed me sleeping. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, "Until our skin sings again." I had it tested. The metal was infused with her prescription medication, designed to leak slowly through skin contact. Even facing legal consequences, she'd planted one final attempt at transformation. I turned it over to the police as evidence of restraining order violation. The next months were quiet. I moved to a new apartment with multiple security measures. I returned to work, rebuilding my professional reputation one project at a time. The skin checks became less frequent, though I still examined new products carefully. Trust, once broken by someone you loved, healed slowly. 6 months later, I was called to testify at another trial. Dia's grandmother and several family members faced charges for their healing collective that had traumatized dozens of children over decades. I saw photographs of other victims, children forced into skin rituals, taught that love meant shared suffering. Dia wasn't there, still in treatment, but her progress reports were read aloud. She was beginning to understand that her family's traditions were abuse, not love. The deprogramming was working, but experts said it would take years to undo a lifetime of indoctrination. I testified about what I'd witnessed, the contamination campaign that had nearly destroyed my life. Other victims shared similar stories. Friends and partners targeted for forced transformation, lives disrupted by someone's delusional love. We were a strange support group, bonded by the bizarre nature of our trauma. The collective was disbanded, its leaders sentenced to various terms. The building where they'd held rituals was investigated, revealing decades of medical equipment used for contamination ceremonies, jars of preserved skin, carefully labeled with names and dates, charts tracking bloodlines and potential skin bonds. Evidence of a generational delusion that had hurt so many. I kept working with my therapist, processing the grief of losing Dia twice, once to her delusion, again to the necessary legal separation. The friend I'd loved was gone, but understanding her indoctrination helped me forgive the woman she'd become. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. Some relationships couldn't be saved, only mourned. My family slowly rebuilt around the crater Dia had left. My sister started bringing her children around again. My parents stopped walking on eggshells. The extended relatives who'd chosen sides during the trial found ways to reconnect. We didn't talk about Dia, but her absence was always present. I returned to the farmer's market one Saturday, buying vegetables from the vendor who'd known us since childhood. She squeezed my hand, her eyes wet with memories. The community had healed in its own way, learning to hold space for both grief and relief. The restraining order paperwork lived in my filing cabinet, a reminder that love could become dangerous when twisted by delusion. I'd won my freedom, but the victory came with permanent scars, not on my skin, but deeper where only I could feel them. My skin remained my own, unmarked by her condition, unmatched to her suffering. We would never be the bonded pair her family's tradition demanded. That separation, fought for in court and maintained by law, was both my salvation and my sorrow. The war for my skin was over. I'd won, but winning and healing were different battles entirely. Thank you for reading this thoughtful and unusual story with me. I hope you have a wonderful day filled with good things.